What the hell are you doing in my bed? Edward's voice sliced through the night like a blade. No whisper, no restraint. It tore through the fragile silence of the bedroom, where the two children had finally fallen asleep after countless nights wrestling with memories. Maya didn't flinch. She remained seated at the edge of the bed, one hand gently supporting Eli's tiny back, the other shielding the light creeping through the curtain. Ethan lay with his head resting on her lap, his breathing steady like a soft tide. A faint line of dried sweat still marked his forehead from yesterday's fever. Maya looked at Edward, not pleading, not apologizing, not defiant. Her eyes seemed to say only, "They're sleeping. Don't wake them. Don't disturb this peace." Edward didn't care. He stepped in, every footfall like treading on glass. His face gaunt under the dim lamp, hair unkempt, tie still hanging from his neck like he'd forgotten to remove it a century ago. His eyes were bloodshot, whether from alcohol, insomnia, or both. "Get out of the room," he said, each word sharp. "I don't know who you are, but you're not allowed to touch my kids." Maya tightened her grip slightly around Eli's shoulders. He stirred, murmured, "Mama," in a daze, then drifted back to sleep. She didn't move. She said nothing to explain. Edward stepped closer, raising an arm as if to forcibly pull her up. "Edward." Angela's voice rang from the doorway. Calm, cold, clear. He froze like someone snapped out of a trance. Angela entered, closing the door behind her. "I brought her here, and I saw something you, with all your pride and holes in your heart, haven't yet." Edward exhaled, retreating half a step, but his eyes stayed locked on Maya, as if still searching for a reason to stay angry. Before the story begins, if you believe that no child should feel unwanted, hit subscribe and comment "belong" with your country. 3 days earlier, Maya had come to the community center in an old coat, clutching a thin envelope containing her job application. "What do you want to do?" Angela asked. "Make sure a child doesn't feel abandoned," Maya replied. "If that's allowed." Angela looked into her eyes that had seen the world collapse without panic. Then she nodded. She brought Maya to a mansion deep in the forest, where Edward Hawthorne lived with his 2 small children after the sudden death of his wife. Angela had only said, "He doesn't hire strangers. Today you're not staff, you're just here to do something people don't have a title." For Edward had been unhappy from the first meeting. The door opened to a gust of cold air, part air conditioning, part the chill in his stare. Maya stood at the threshold like someone stepping into a land with invisible barriers. Edward didn't offer a handshake or invite her in. He simply looked her over from head to toe, as if inspecting an object with no clear use. His eyes were rimmed red, his shirt still creased from a sleepless night. "Why are you here?" His voice was cold and dry, like gravel underfoot. "Here to be their father for me?" Maya didn't bow her head, but she also didn't stand tall in defiance. She just nodded slightly, her gaze slowly locking with his. Her eyes held no fire, only weariness and depth, like someone used to being misunderstood. "I'm not here to be anyone," she answered softly but firmly. "I just don't know how to turn away from a child who sees me as something to hold on to." A faint ticking came from the wall clock behind Edward, a sound so subtle it usually went unnoticed. But in the stillness of the large room, it pierced the air between them like a silent warning that time was watching to see who would back down first. Edward said nothing more. He just shook his head, turned his back, and left the door open behind him. Maya stepped inside without waiting for permission. In the kitchen, the dim yellow light shone on the marble countertop, cold as ice. 2 bowls of noodles sat side by side, one with its chopsticks placed backward. Edward was still clumsy with the little things. "You didn't have to cook," Maya said as she sat down. "There's no one else to cook for," Edward replied without looking at her. "And noodles are..." Easy. They ate in silence for a while. The noodles were slightly soggy. Maybe he'd overboiled them while lost in thought. No one corrected anyone's mistakes. Then he set down his chopsticks and leaned back in his chair. "What kind of man do you think I am?" Maya looked up. The question carried no tone, as if he were asking about the weather. "No kind," she said. "Just a man trying to stay still while the ground keeps shifting under his feet." Edward let out a faint laugh, the kind you make when flipping a coin, unsure whether to bet on it. "Did anyone ever teach you how to stay?" he asked, for the first time calling her you instead of that woman or her. "No," Maya answered. "Only had moments where I knew if I stood up and walked away, no one else would come back." The words hung in the air like smoke curling around a light bulb. Edward rested his elbows on the table, turning an empty glass in his hands. "Aren't you tired? Always staying in other people's lives?" Maya looked at him for a long moment, then said slowly, "Yes, but being tired isn't the same as giving up. Being tired means you need rest. Giving up means deciding no one is worth the effort anymore." He didn't respond, but his gaze settled on a small burn mark on the table, the one the kids had made last week playing with candle flames. He hadn't cleaned it. Not because he was lazy, but because he didn't know how to erase something tied to what he feared losing most. Outside, the wind rustled the trees, blew through the open window, and made the wind chime knock gently against the iron frame, soft sounds like reminders that something was still alive in this house, whether anyone admitted it or not. Maya stood up. She refilled the jug with water and quietly replaced his teacup without asking. "You don't have to believe me," she said as she turned away. "Just let the kids see I haven't disappeared." Edward called out, as if afraid that if he didn't say it now, he never would. "Maya." She turned her head but said nothing, waiting. He spoke slowly, as if scraping rust off a long-forgotten phrase. "What do the kids call you?" Maya smiled, gentle but not soft. "They don't call me anything. They just don't push me away anymore. That's enough." Edward bowed his head, for so long that Maya thought he'd sunk into a thought with no exit. But then he only breathed out. "All right, then stay." Not an invitation, not exactly acceptance, just a tiny crack between two walls. But for someone who's lived their whole life in cracks, that was enough. No one warns you how a new week will begin. Sometimes it simply begins with someone showing up, carrying a wound no one expected. Lorraine arrived on Monday morning, earlier than planned, the kind of person who trusts nothing unless she verifies it herself. The silver Audi pulled up neatly in front of the steps. The door opened and the sound of leather heels striking the cement was small but sharp enough to shatter the morning's calm. Edward stepped out, barely exhaled a greeting. "I thought you were coming," before she cut in with her first line. "You said the weekend, but the house burned down midweek, Edward. And let you burn it down yourself with foolish trust?" Lorraine placed her handbag on the table like throwing down a statement. "Where is she?" Her voice was crisp, leaving no trace of warmth. Maya had just come in from the backyard, sweater sleeves rolled up to her elbows, marked with streaks of water and soil, a damp towel still draped over one shoulder. Lorraine's eyes flicked over, her like spotting a stain on a wedding tablecloth. "Aunt Lorraine," Edward said, trying to remain calm. "This is Maya." "Maya," she repeated the name, as if savoring an unfamiliar flavor. Lorraine removed her sunglasses and looked at Maya for a moment. "What are you doing here?" Maya answered plainly. "Helping the kids sleep on time and wake up without fear." Lorraine frowned and lowered her voice. "I didn't ask what you do. I asked what you are." The question landed like a clean slice. No room for ambiguity. Edward cut in. "She's not a nanny, and not staff either." "Then what is she? A temporary fix? A substitute for loss?" Maya didn't step back. She placed the towel on a chair, washed her hands, poured Lorraine a glass of water, and then said gently, "No label is needed to choose to stay. Sometimes all it takes is being present, long enough for the kids to believe the world hasn't completely fallen apart." Lorraine sat down, legs crossed, holding the glass without drinking. "Edward, you know children cling like vines to a pole, but if the pole's unstable, it will collapse sooner or later." Edward nodded slightly. "I know." "Then don't let them start thinking the vine is a roof." That night, Maya sat in the living room. Eli rested his head on her lap, and Ethan sprawled on the floor, piecing together a puzzle. Each soft click, as the pieces connected, echoed like a heartbeat. Not loud, but alive. Outside, the rain fell steadily on the roof, like voices from the past knocking on the door of memory. Edward leaned in the doorway, holding a glass of wine he hadn't sipped. His eyes were tired, but still watchful. "Do you know what they think of you?" he asked, not as sharp as usual. Just a question, worn out at the edges. Maya looked up, gently brushing Eli's hair. "I've lived long enough to get used to the way people look at what they don't understand. But getting used to it doesn't mean you don't feel it." He was quiet for a moment, then said, "My aunt thinks you're a risk." "Maybe. But the only thing more dangerous than risk is not trying at all." He sat in the chair across from her, shoulders slightly slumped. "Have you ever done something wrong?" Maya smiled softly, without bitterness or self-pity. "I've walked away, stayed silent when I should have spoken. But the worst thing was trying to fix things when no one wanted to listen." The next morning, while Edward was still making coffee, Lorraine was already waiting for Maya in the dining room. No children, no sunlight, just two women, one who had kept everything inside, and one who was holding it all together through silence. "I know your kind," Lorraine began, her eyes fixed on her teacup. "Grew up somewhere messy, dragged a dozen wounds through life, then thought you could heal others." Maya didn't respond. She took a sip of tea, eyes resting on her hands folded neatly in her lap. "No one ever thought I could, but when everyone leaves, staying is already a beginning." Lorraine nodded, very slightly, as if, for the first time, she was admitting something she couldn't put into words. "Do you know why I don't like you? Because I don't belong in your world?" "No." She looked up, her eyes cloudy like rainwater pooled beneath a roof. "Because the kids have started sleeping well, and I hate that a stranger managed to do what family couldn't." Maya stayed silent. She didn't argue, but she didn't lower her gaze either. Inside, she thought, some people know how to love, but they only love once others are too exhausted from loving in their place. Lorraine, a woman raised on structure, running her life with spreadsheets and experience. She didn't believe in instinct, and even less in strangers. Her love wasn't gentle, it was strict, conditional, and always came with warnings. But deep in her eyes was someone who had once loved too much, and been hurt by trusting the wrong person. She didn't hate Maya. She hated that Maya did what she couldn't. That night, after Lorraine had gone to bed, Edward came into the kitchen and saw Maya washing dishes. Her sleeves were wet, hair tied high, a few strands loose. Around her neck, nothing glamorous, but something about her felt in the right place. "My aunt said some harsh things." He leaned against the cabinet, dish towel still slung over his shoulder. "She wasn't wrong," Maya replied, not turning around. "But I didn't come here to be understood, just to stay, until staying isn't needed anymore." He watched her for a moment. "How long do you plan to stay? Until the kids stop holding hands in their sleep. And how will you know when that is? Maybe when they stop looking back through the doorway." Edward nodded. The wine in his hand had gone warm, but for the first time, his eyes didn't avoid hers. I'm just afraid that when that day comes, I'll realize I never knew how to hold on to anyone. That night, Maya walked past the hallway. Light leaked through the crack beneath Edward's door. She stopped, looked in. He was sitting still, flipping slowly through an old photo album. Each page held pictures of his late wife, of the two kids back when they still wore diapers. No tears. But his hand rested on a photo like he was touching something that couldn't return, yet couldn't let go of. Maya didn't knock. She just stood there for a few seconds, then walked away. Because some doors, you shouldn't step into it. But you also shouldn't pretend not to see. This is why kindness matters more than titles. If you feel that deep down, hit subscribe and comment kind over right. The next morning, when the house had quieted again, Maya packed her bag and returned to the center, somewhere between two kinds of homes. One where people are remembered, the other where they're forgotten. Maya moved through each day like a gatekeeper standing between memory and hope. She woke early, brewed a pot of tea, wiped the tables, clean, then stood for a long while at the window. In the glass, a face stared back at her, one she couldn't tell whether it was waiting for something or fearing what might come. Because some changes don't knock. They come like wind, unannounced, uninvited, and sometimes they bring along someone who needs more than just a roof. Belle arrived on a gray Wednesday afternoon. It wasn't raining, but the wind was heavy, as if the entire sky was pressing down just to fall into that tiny yard in front of the center. The SUV that brought her slowed to a stop at the gate, the engine lingering for a long while before shutting off. Like it too was hesitating to let her out. A frayed backpack, worn combat boots, stained with dirt, old cuffed jeans. Her dyed green hair rippled with every step, like she was trying to create a visual shock before anyone could slap a label on her. She got out of the car without looking back, as if there was nothing worth looking back at. No one inside waved goodbye, and no one was allowed to see her gripping her bag straps so tightly her fingernails left imprints on her skin. Joseph, the center's liaison, only said one thing to Maya. This is her last chance. 8 months, 5 placements. She's never lasted. She's a problem no one solved. Then he walked away, leaving behind a 16-year-old girl with eyes layered in scars older than her age. Belle wasn't destructive in the way kids labeled troubled usually are. She didn't scream, didn't hit, didn't act out. But her eyes were like a locked room, no windows, nowhere for anyone to step inside. At 16, Belle was used to no one being able to hold on to her. Not because she wasn't worth holding, but because too many had tried and given up too soon. She had learned to turn herself into a scratch, just small enough to make people want to brush her off. The green hair, torn shoes, worn bag, none of it was meant to stand out. It was her way of telling the world, I won't stay, don't bother. Maya approached. Your name is Belle, right? The girl looked at her like sizing up the worth of a door. What, you the new warden or something? No, I'm Maya. Belle shrugged and shoved the door open. The scent of fresh wood mixed with detergent. Clean, unfamiliar. The way she didn't remove her shoes made the wooden floor squeak, rough, dry, and alive. On the first day, Belle didn't say a word to anyone. No greetings? No thanks. No eye contact. She sat alone at the edge of the long dining table, back to the window, sunlight casting odd colors through her green hair like spilled ink. She didn't eat. She just tapped her spoon on the yogurt lid, as if to remind everyone this lunch wasn't making her feel any more alive. At the next table, 2 8- or 9-year-olds were drawing smiley faces on banana peels with black markers. They whispered and burst into laughter when one banana looked like a squashed sun. Belle stared, then muttered just loud enough for herself to hear, "Stupid games for fake people." Joe, the staff member who doubled as cook, watched from the kitchen, wiping his hands on his apron, frowning. He wasn't quick to speak, but when he did, his words always landed in places no one expected. He quietly stepped beside Maya and murmured, eyes still on Belle, "She's not mute. She stays silent because she sees nothing out there worth speaking to." Maya gave a slight nod, folding the tablecloth with a water stain. "I know. She's not fighting anyone, just trying to protect what's still intact inside." Joe sighed, scratching his head like trying to loosen something stuck inside himself. "Every time we take in a kid like her, I wonder if we're just giving them a new place to be abandoned." Maya turned, her voice calm but steady. "As long as we still see them, not with pity, but truly. This place hasn't turned into a void yet." Joe said nothing else, but he carefully placed a slice of cake on Belle's table. Didn't speak, didn't look, and walked away. Belle looked up, saw the cake. She didn't touch it, but she stopped tapping the spoon. That night, while others played paper folding games and board games, Belle hid in the back art shed. Maya found her sitting on the floor, sketching furiously on a sheet of paper, rough marks and jagged strokes, like metal scratching glass. A bird without wings, its beak wide open in a silent scream no one heard. "What are you drawing?" Maya sat beside her, keeping the distance one keeps with a stray cat that hasn't learned to trust. "Silence," Belle replied, her voice like gravel scraping steel. "The thing no one bothers to understand." "I think silence knows how to scream. People just won't stand still long enough to hear it." "What the hell do you know about silence?" Belle sneered. "You ever get kicked out of 5 homes?" Maya didn't answer. For the first time, silence wasn't about yielding. It was because there was nothing to compare to a cut that deep. Belle shut her notebook, stood, and walked out. The smell of acrylic still clung to her hair, lingering in the room like an echo that refused to fade. 3 days later, Belle was still a thorn in a garden trying to grow back. She didn't destroy. She didn't lash out. She simply existed as defiance. She turned the TV volume down when someone turned it up. She stared down every greeting like it was a trap. She turned faucets low if someone turned them high. She dropped her spoon loudly when meals began. She wasn't loud in rebellion. She just didn't let anyone get close. That night, an 8-year-old girl named Ivy, with frizzy hair and always wet eyes, whispered to Maya while folding blankets, "Is Belle mad at the whole world?" Maya paused, smiled gently, her voice as if speaking to herself. "No, maybe she's only mad at one person, but everyone else keeps standing too close, at the wrong time." On the 4th night, Maya received a message, a post from a foster parent support group. A former caregiver of Belle's had written, "That girl is a problem, unfixable. Every center should refuse her. She only knows how to destroy. She doesn't know how to love." At that same moment, Maya passed by the counseling room. Through the slightly ajar door, she overheard Angela and Joe talking. Angela leaned back in her chair, turning a worn silver ring on her finger. Her voice was slow but firm, like an old latch closing from inside. "I'm afraid Maya's putting too much into Belle. That girl," she let out a long sigh, like slipping across an old wound. "Some people just can't be saved." Joe didn't respond right away. He looked out the window, where the kids played in the yard, wind lifting the edge of Maya's brown coat as she reached for a wind-blown umbrella. He stayed silent so long that Angela nearly thought he wouldn't answer. "She believes Belle can stay," Joe said, not looking at her, his voice like he was reaffirming something to himself. Angela frowned, eyes fixed on the wood grain of the table. "But what if Belle doesn't want to?" The question dropped like a stone into a bowl, already full of water. The entire room seemed to lower. Joe leaned forward, hands clasped, forehead carved with the fatigue of too many sleepless years and too little faith. He spoke quietly, each word carving into wood. Then the one who will hurt won't be Belle. He swallowed hard, unable to hide it. It'll be Maya. Angela looked at him for a long time. No nod, no protest. But her shoulders softened, as if finally understanding the true weight of belief. The next evening, Maya found Belle crouched in a corner of the second-floor hallway, where the flickering tube light trembled like the heartbeat of someone trying not to slip. The wooden floor beneath her was cold, the daylight long gone, leaving only shadow and stillness. On her knees lay an open sketchbook. The page was now a mess of strange shapes. A tree without roots, leaves tilted like a sighing rain, brittle, branches stretching toward a narrow ray of light squeezed between two windows, like a hope already stifled at birth. Maya didn't speak right away. She leaned against the wall, voice low, soft, like retelling her own past. "I used to think I didn't belong anywhere," she said, eyes gazing into the dark. "Even when people said, 'Just stay.'" Belle's pen paused, hovering as if unsure whether to trust or resist. "So what did you do?" she asked, voice hoarse, like scraped from her throat. "I stayed," Maya answered, "until I could believe it myself." Belle looked up. Her eyes, once full of thorns, for the first time looked directly. No walls, no defenses, no trace of retreat. "I'm scared if I stay too long, they'll change their mind." Maya placed her hand on the cold floor. Her palm pressed into a dried paint stain from a time when the kids played with markers. She spoke slowly, like touching the emptiness inside herself. "Then this time, if they change their mind, you'll still have you. You won't be hollow anymore." Sunday night. Maya had just turned off the lights when there was a soft knock at the door, 3 short taps like a message too scared to speak aloud. Belle stood there. The hallway light cast her face in sharp relief, red eyes, hands clenched together as if letting go would cause her to shatter. No makeup, no armor, just a child, for the first time, shedding her anger like an oversized coat. "I don't want to go back." Maya stood still. Her voice was neutral. "Because you hate the old place? Or because you're starting to... like this one?" Belle hesitated, then nodded, barely, like confessing something that had sat too long in her chest. "Both." Maya pulled her inside. No more questions, no comfort, no full embrace, just a light hand on her shoulder, as if presence itself was the answer. They sat side by side. No promises, no guarantees, just being there together in silence. After a while, Belle's voice escaped her lips, not louder than a breath, but heavy like a heart trying to beat again. "Do you think someone like me could really stay?" Maya didn't answer right away. She looked into the darkness, filling the room, as if searching for words in a place no one wanted to go. Then she said, slow and sure, "No one is born to be moved around." A pause. The wind slipped through the crack under the door. "You're not an object, Belle. You're a person, and people can stay when they're brave enough to believe they deserve to." The next morning, Maya called Joe out to the backyard. Belle was standing on an old wooden chair, paintbrush in hand, painting a bird on the gray wall. Its wings were broken, but instead of blood, golden threads flew from the wounds, so thin they looked like wind could tear them away. But they didn't. They stretched from the pain to the sky. Joe crossed his arms, staring without blinking. After a long while, he asked, his voice soft, "What's she painting?" Maya kept her eyes on the wall, didn't turn. "Hope. It never went out. Belle just hid it better than most." Joe nodded, a slow, quiet nod. Something caught in his throat, like seeing something worth believing in, for the first time in a long time. Let's just hope this time she doesn't have to hope alone, Maya replied, almost a whisper. She's not alone anymore. When a voice shakes but still speaks, that's courage. If you believe in brave hearts, click subscribe. And type voice matters. But peace has never been a lasting state. Just as Belle began to believe she could stay, not because anyone allowed it, but because her heart no longer felt like it was in the way, another door opened. Not to welcome, but to test. The storm always comes after the most beautiful days. And this time, it didn't knock like Belle once had. It came crashing in with a cold question. Who has the right to stay? It began with a small article tucked in the corner of a local news site. The headline wasn't sensational, but it was icy, cold enough to raise the hairs on one's skin. An unlicensed therapeutic center illegally housing minors? Maya read the piece in silence. Morning sunlight poured through the kitchen window, still warm as usual, but for the first time it wasn't enough to thaw the cold in her hands. She turned off the screen. The corner of her eye began to twitch, not from fear, but from a strange intuition. This wasn't random. Edward walked in, shirt half-buttoned, belt hanging loose, hair damp with mist. Something happened? Maya turned. Her voice floated, like an unfinished message. They're coming to inspect. They said, we're housing someone unlawfully. Edward paused for a few seconds, then tightened his grip on his bag strap. Who's behind this? Don't know yet, but whoever it is understands how this place works, and struck at the exact moment it would hurt most. 3 days later, the calls began to pour in like water seeping from an old roof. Not loud, but enough to drown everything. Child welfare, the licensing board, an independent journalism collective. They asked about staff qualifications. They demanded therapy records. They questioned legal procedures. And then came the precise blow, like scissors cutting straight through a seam. Belle Harris, a minor, cannot reside long-term in an unlicensed facility. No one said it out loud, but every glance drifted toward Maya, and through her, to Belle. That statement didn't pierce Maya. It struck straight into Belle, as if she were the gap the storm had chosen to enter. That night, a soft knock came at Maya's door, as if even the one knocking wasn't sure about what they were about to do. Belle stood at the threshold. She wasn't crying, but her shoulders curled inward, like she was holding a crack she hadn't dared name. Am I the reason everything is falling apart? Maya didn't rush to answer. She stepped forward, took Belle's hand, and gently pulled her onto the seat beside her. No, you didn't do anything wrong. But if I weren't here, maybe they wouldn't want to tear this place down. No, they wanted to strike where we're most vulnerable. And you're the first one who made this place feel real. That's why they want to rip you out. Belle clenched her hands. Her voice was barely a thread being pulled. I don't want to leave. Maya nodded slightly. Then we'll stay. But this time, not just with paintings. Friday morning. The center's meeting room wasn't big, but it was packed with a silent tension. Angela sat upright. Lionel folded his arms. Joseph looked at Maya like someone waiting for an exit they weren't sure they had the courage to take. On the table was a copy of the inspection notice, and Belle's file, the first page folded, the edges blurred by water. Maya stood. Her voice wasn't loud, but every word landed directly in the bloodstream. Has anyone here ever given up halfway? Just because we believed a child was beyond saving. Silence. Then Joseph gave a slight nod, like confessing his own failure. Not because we didn't want to try, but sometimes we're scared we've trusted the wrong person. Angela looked at Maya, her voice softening. So what do you plan to do? Tell the story. All of it. In the voice of the people who lived it, before someone else twists it into a scandal. Sunday. Out in the backyard of the center, where the kids once painted dreams with cheap paint, a single camera was set up. No backdrop, no lights, just a wall still marked by dirty handprints. Belle sat on a wooden chair in a fuzzy sweater, hair tied high, no makeup, no polish. The afternoon sun fell across her face, sharp and unfiltered. She looked into the lens. Every word came out like it had been chewed through dust. I'm Belle Harris, 16 years old, 10 homes, 5 last names. I got kicked out of one place for not smiling sweetly enough. She paused, looked up. Her eyes didn't beg, didn't attack. She was just a kid, speaking her story for the first time. But here, for the first time, I met someone who didn't leave, even when I slammed the door in her face. She took a breath and spoke like someone writing the first sentence of a book they were never meant to be allowed to write. We don't heal with laws. We heal by choosing to stay. Every day. Every person. No avoiding. No giving up. The speech spread like a slow fire. Not explosive, but enough to burn away doubt. Belle's painting of the bird with broken wings and gold-stitched wounds was chosen as the cover for a national psychology journal. The licensing board didn't withdraw the file, but they granted 30 days to complete the paperwork. An international medical organization offered to train the entire team for free, and a handwritten letter, on wrinkled paper, with tilted handwriting, came from one of Belle's former foster mothers. I'm sorry, I didn't see her the way Maya did. Sunday night, the old tree in the backyard casts long shadows across the wet grass. Maya sat next to Belle, Edward, and the children. Ethan told a joke that wasn't very funny. Another kid folded paper airplanes and flew them in circles around Belle's chair. Belle laughed, a real laugh. Her back rested against the tree, hair falling over her shoulders. Light, as if she had set down a weight somewhere and forgotten it had always been on her. Edward poured tea for Maya. He asked, his voice low, "Do you think this center will last?" Maya looked at him for a long time, then smiled as if she'd known the answer before the question was asked. It already has, not because of a nameplate, but because of every person who chose not to leave. Belle looked at Maya. She asked like a child asking the thing she once feared the most. "Someday, can I do what you do?" Maya placed a hand over the girl's heart. Her voice carried no hope, only certainty. You already have. You're the voice others haven't dared to speak. Because healing isn't a destination. It's a string of small decisions to open up again, to try again, to forgive others and yourself. And sometimes, just one person staying is enough to begin everything else. Before you go, if this story touched something inside you, subscribe and comment. One word, hope.